Ma'am, stop arguing. Your tint gives me probable cause.
No, officer, that statute doesn't apply, and you know it.
You think you know the law better than me?
I don't think. I know.
Ma'am, I am quoting the statute exactly as it is written in the Georgia Code. No officer that is factually incorrect. The statute you are referencing, OCGA 4876, applies specifically to child restraint requirements and passenger safety, not to the tint grading of my windows or the status of my vehicle's registration. Are you trying to be difficult? Do you think you know how to do my job better than I do? I am not being difficult, officer. I am being precise. And this traffic stop is currently operating outside the boundaries of the Fourth Amendment. You need to stop talking like you are in a courtroom. I could be in a courtroom if I wanted to be, but right now I am sitting on the side of a county road explaining why your detainment of me lacks reasonable articulable suspicion. You are twisting my words. I know what the law says. Then please tell me the exact subsection that authorizes a stop based on a hunch about window tint without a tint meter verification prior to the stop. You are being argumentative. No, officer. I am being accurate. You pulled me over because of the demographic you assume I fit into, and you are now realizing that the legal justification for this seizure is evaporating. Ma'am, listen to me. At exactly 7:15 p.m., on a humid, moss-draped back road outside of Savannah, Georgia, a traffic stop that should have been a 30-second interaction turned into a career-defining catastrophe for one veteran police officer. The body camera footage from this encounter would eventually circulate through legal forums, civil rights seminars, and social media feeds, accumulating millions of views and sparking fierce debates. But this was not the typical viral video of a shouting match or a physical altercation. This was something far more surgical. This was a doctoral candidate in criminal justice, armed with encyclopedic knowledge, going head-to-head with an officer who believed his badge granted him immunity from questioning. What transpired next would shock the Chatham County Police Department force a rewrite of training manuals and demonstrate that sometimes the most dangerous weapon a citizen can carry is a thorough understanding of the Constitution. Before we dive deeper into this story, could you do me a quick favor? Drop a comment below and let me know which city or state you are tuning in from. And if you believe in holding power accountable, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get very intense, and you will want to see how the investigation unfolds. Maya Reynolds was not your average 29-year-old. While many of her peers were navigating the early stages of corporate ladders or settling into family life, Maya was in the final grueling months of her Ph.D. program at the University of Georgia. But she wasn't just a student. She was a force of nature within her department. Maya held a pristine academic record, having already secured a tenure-track position pending her dissertation defense. Her area of expertise was not just general law, but specifically the intersection of race policing and the Fourth Amendment. She had spent the last 5 years analyzing traffic stop data, dissecting Supreme Court rulings, and teaching undergraduate courses on civil liberties. The Fourth Amendment is the bedrock of American privacy rights. It protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. In layman's terms, it means the government represented by the police cannot stop you, detain you, or search your property without a specific legal reason. Maya didn't just know the summary of the amendment. She knew the case law. She knew Terry v. Ohio. She knew Wren v. United States. She knew Rodriguez v. United States. She carried this knowledge like armor. On that particular Tuesday evening in April, Maya was driving back to her apartment in Savannah after visiting her grandmother in a rural part of the county. The Georgia air was heavy and thick, the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin. The Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees brushed against the twilight sky. Maya was driving her 2020 sedan, a reliable car she kept in immaculate condition. She had a podcast playing low on the stereo, analyzing recent circuit court decisions. She was driving 5 miles under the speed limit, her hands at 10 and 2, her eyes scanning the road. She was not texting. She was not eating. She was simply existing while driving. Then came the blue lights. They erupted in her rearview mirror, piercing the dusk with blinding intensity. Maya's heart rate spiked, a physiological reaction that happens to almost everyone regardless of guilt or innocence. But for Maya, the spike was followed immediately by a cold, analytical calculation. She checked her speedometer, 40 in a 45 zone. She checked her lane position centered. She checked her seatbelt fastened. She realized instantly that she had committed no traffic infraction. This was a fishing expedition. She engaged her turn signal, pulled safely onto the grass shoulder of the two-lane road, put the car in park, and turned off the engine. She rolled down her window, placed her keys on the dashboard, and rested both hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. She knew the statistics. She knew that according to the Stanford Open Policing Project, which analyzed over 100 million traffic stops, black drivers like herself are pulled over at higher rates than white drivers during the day. But that disparity drops at night when the race of the driver is harder to see, unless, of course, the stop is pretextual. She prepared herself for the interaction. The officer who approached her vehicle was Sergeant Thomas Miller, a white male in his mid-40s with 15 years on the force. He walked with a heavy, confident stride, his hand resting near his holster. Miller was known in the precinct as a proactive officer, a euphemism often used for officers who pushed the boundaries of probable cause to generate arrests. He expected nervousness. He expected excuses. He expected submission. License and registration. Miller said, his voice flat and commanding, leaning down to look into the window. Maya turned her head slowly, keeping her hands visible. Officer, for my safety and yours, I'm going to move my right hand to my purse on the passenger seat to retrieve my wallet. Is that all right? Miller blinked. The compliance was there, but the tone was authoritative. Go ahead. Maya retrieved her documents and handed them over, but she didn't stop there. Officer, before we proceed, may I ask the specific reason for this stop? This was the first deviation from Miller's expected script. Usually people waited for him to tell them what they did wrong. I pulled you over because your window tint looks excessive and you were drifting in your lane. Maya stared at him. Her window tint was factory standard 35%, which is legal in Georgia, and she hadn't drifted an inch. Officer, my tint is factory standard and legally compliant under Georgia law, and I have a dash cam recording both the front and interior of my vehicle, which will verify that I have maintained perfect lane integrity for the last 10 miles. So I will ask again, what is the articulable, reasonable suspicion for this stop? Saw. Miller stood up straighter. The mention of a dash cam annoyed him. I don't need to debate the law with you on the side of the road. I'm checking your license. Actually, Officer Under Rodriguez v. United States, you cannot extend a traffic stop beyond the time reasonably required to address the initial violation to conduct an unrelated investigation without additional reasonable suspicion. Since your stated reasons for the stop tint and drifting are factually baseless and easily disproven by my video evidence, you are currently detaining me unlawfully. Quick question for everyone watching. Have you ever felt like an officer was making up a reason to pull you over? Type yes or no in the comments right now. Sergeant Miller's face flushed a deep red. He wasn't used to being cited Supreme Court precedent by a woman in a Toyota. Ma'am, step out of the car. For what purpose, officer? Because I ordered you to. Pennsylvania v. Mims says I can order a driver out of the vehicle. Maya didn't flinch. You are correct that Pennsylvania v. Mims allows an officer to order a driver out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop for officer safety. However, since the initial stop was devoid of reasonable suspicion, the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine applies. Any order you give following an illegal seizure is constitutionally suspect. However, I will comply under duress to ensure my physical safety, but state for the record that I do not consent to this search or seizure. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the humid evening air. She stood 5'7", wearing a blazer and jeans, projecting an air of absolute calm that was far more intimidating than aggression. Miller looked her up and down, seemingly unsure of how to proceed. His body camera was blinking red, recording every second of his faltering authority. Are you a lawyer? Miller asked, his tone shifting from command to curiosity mixed with apprehension. I am a doctoral candidate specializing in criminal procedure and constitutional law. I teach this subject. I grade papers on the very mistakes you are making right now. And I am telling you, Officer Miller, badge number 592, as I see on your chest, that you are currently violating my Fourth Amendment rights. Miller hesitated. He looked at his patrol car. He looked at Maya. He looked at her car. I'm going to run your license. Stand by the trunk. I will wait here. But be advised, officer, that if you hold me here longer than it takes to run a standard license check, to call for a K-9 unit, or to fish for other crimes, you are violating the holding in Rodriguez. It is 7:19 p.m. The clock is ticking. Miller walked back to his cruiser. He sat in the driver's seat, his heart pounding. He ran her name. Maya Reynolds. Clean record. No warrants. No parking tickets. Nothing. He sat there for a moment, realizing he had stepped into a trap of his own making. He had pulled her over because it was a slow night. She was a black woman in a nice car in a rural area, and he wanted to see if he could find something drugs money, anything. It was a hunch based on bias, not evidence, and now he was up against someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He radioed dispatch. Dispatch, can I get a K-9 unit to my location? Negative 592, K-9 is 20 minutes out on another call. 20 minutes. If he waited 20 minutes, she would sue him and she would win. He knew it. He looked back at her in his rearview mirror. She was standing by her trunk, checking her watch, writing something down in a small notebook she had taken from her pocket. She was documenting the timeline. Miller got out of his car and walked back to her. Everything checks out. I'm going to let you off with a warning this time. Maya didn't take the license back immediately. She looked him in the eye. A warning for what, officer? For driving with legal tint. For driving within my lane. A warning implies I committed an infraction. I did not. You are retreating because you know this stop was bad. You're free to go, Miller said, thrusting the license toward her, eager to end the interaction. Maya took the license. Before I leave, I need your full name, your badge number, and the name of your precinct commander. I also need the incident report number for this stop. It's on the warning slip. I want you to verbally confirm it for your body camera. The silence on the road was deafening. Crickets chirped in the ditch. A pickup truck drove by, slowing down to look. Miller took a deep breath. Sergeant Thomas Miller, badge 592, Chatham County East Division. Commander is Captain Higgins. Thank you, Sergeant. Expect a formal complaint and a preservation letter for this body camera footage by tomorrow morning. Maya got back in her car, waited for a safe break in traffic, and merged back onto the road. The entire encounter had lasted 14 minutes, but the fallout would last for months. The next morning, Maya didn't just go to class. She went to war. She drafted a 10-page formal complaint detailing the encounter. She didn't use emotional language. She used legal analysis. She broke down the timeline. She cited the specific inconsistencies in Miller's statements. She referenced the dashcam footage she had already backed up to 3 different cloud servers. She sent the complaint to the Internal Affairs Division, the Civilian Review Board, the Mayor's Office, and the local chapter of the ACLU. The Chatham County Police Department received the packet at 9:00 a.m. By 10:30 a.m., Sergeant Miller was pulled off patrol and placed on administrative desk duty. The detail of the complaint was unlike anything they had ever seen from a civilian. It was a legal brief. The investigation was assigned to Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins of Internal Affairs. Jenkins was a no-nonsense investigator who was tired of officers making sloppy stops that resulted in lawsuits the city had to pay for. She pulled Miller's body camera footage. She watched it in her office with the door closed. The footage was damning. It showed Miller approaching with aggression. It showed Maya's perfect compliance. It showed the absurdity of the tint accusation when the windows were clearly standard. But most importantly, it showed Miller's inability to articulate a crime. When he went back to his car, the camera captured him muttering to himself, "She's a lawyer or something. Just cut her loose." It proved he had no probable cause. He was just scared of her knowledge. Jenkins dug deeper. She looked at Miller's stop history. This brings us to the statistical reality of policing that we must address. Data shows that in many jurisdictions, black drivers are significantly more likely to be searched after a stop than white drivers despite contraband being found less often. Jenkins ran the numbers on Miller specifically. Over the last 2 years, 65% of Miller's discretionary stops were of black drivers, even though the demographic makeup of his patrol area was only 30% black. He had a pattern. Maya wasn't the first. She was just the first one who knew exactly how to dismantle him. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Maya defended her dissertation. She passed with distinction. She was now Dr. Maya Reynolds. When the findings came down, they were severe. The department found that Sergeant Miller had violated policy on search and seizure, had filed a misleading report regarding the justification for the stop, and had engaged in biased policing practices. The recommendation was termination. Miller, facing the end of his career and the loss of his pension, tried to fight it. He claimed he had officer intuition. He claimed the area was a high-crime corridor. But the bodycam footage didn't lie, and Maya's legal deconstruction of his actions left him no wiggle room. He chose to retire early with a reduced benefits package, rather than face a termination hearing that would be a matter of public record. But the story didn't end with Miller's resignation. Maya sued the department for the violation of her civil rights. She didn't do it for the money. She did it to force a consent decree. She represented herself with assistance from the ACLU. The city, terrified of a jury watching that video and hearing Dr. Reynolds speak, settled. As part of the settlement, the Chatham County Police Department was required to overhaul its traffic stop training. They had to implement a new policy. Officers were required to state the specific reason for a stop into their radio before activating their lights, preventing them from making up a reason after the fact. They also had to invite outside experts to conduct annual training on the Fourth Amendment. Guess who they hired to lead the first training session? 6 months later, Dr. Maya Reynolds stood at a podium in the department's training auditorium. Sitting in the audience were 50 officers, some looking bored, some looking resentful, and some looking genuinely interested. Behind her, on a large screen, was the video of her own traffic stop. "We are going to watch this video," Maya said, her voice projecting clearly across the room. Not to mock the former officer involved, but to understand the constitutional failure that occurred. You have a difficult job. You have a dangerous job. But the moment you decide that your badge gives you the authority to bypass the Constitution, you are no longer enforcing the law, you are breaking it. She spent the next 3 hours dissecting the Fourth Amendment. She taught them about implicit bias. She showed them the data, the hard numbers about how racial profiling actually lowers police efficiency because it wastes time on innocent people instead of focusing on behavioral indicators of crime. She taught them that a citizenry that knows its rights is not a threat to good policing. It is a check against bad policing. The impact of that traffic stop rippled out. The video released after the settlement became a mandatory watch in law schools across the South. It showed future lawyers what it looked like to stand your ground with grace and intelligence. It showed regular citizens that they didn't have to be rude to be firm. There was a moment in the comments section of the video when it went viral that stood out. A user wrote, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised her standard." But let's address the elephant in the room. Some people watching this might say, Maya was lucky. If she had been less educated, or if the officer had been more aggressive, this could have ended tragically. And that is absolutely true. That is the tragedy of the system. Maya's survival and her victory relied on her being exceptional. She had to be a doctoral candidate, calm under extreme pressure, and legally brilliant just to survive a traffic stop that never should have happened. A regular person confused and scared might have been arrested or worse. Maya acknowledges this. In interviews, she has stated, "I shouldn't have to have a Ph.D. to drive home safely. My education was my shield, but the Constitution should have been shield enough." So what is the lesson here? What should you, the audience, take away from Dr. Reynolds' experience on that Georgia backroad? First, knowledge is the ultimate equalizer. You don't need to go to law school, but you need to know the basics. You need to know that you have the right to ask why you are being stopped. You need to know that you can refuse a search. You need to know that "I don't consent" is a complete sentence. Second documentation is vital. The body camera saved Maya, but so did her dashcam. If you don't have a dashcam, get one. In a he said, she said situation video, evidence is the only neutral party. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we must understand that the law is not a static thing that just exists on paper. It is a living, breathing struggle. It is maintained only when people are willing to stand up and assert it. When you waive your rights because it's easier, you weaken them for everyone else. When you stand up for them, even when your voice shakes, you strengthen the entire system. Maya Reynolds didn't just win a traffic dispute. She forced a system to look in the mirror. She proved that while authority can be given, respect must be earned and legality must be adhered to. Officer Miller lost his career because he underestimated the woman behind the wheel. He saw a profile. He should have seen a person. He saw a suspect. He should have seen a citizen. And because he refused to see her, the world ended up seeing him for exactly what he was. If you found value in this story, if you learned something about your rights or the power of standing your ground, please share this video. The more people who know their rights, the safer our roads become for everyone. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where truth meets justice.